what are your thoughts on authenticity when someone not of a culture is doing all the right techniques, all the right flavors, ingredients with all the right sourcing and provenance and context set, but they're not of the culture?
I think that anyone should be able to cook whatever they want. Where I feel uncomfortable, there isn't enough linkage or respect to that original culture. If you've done the work, if you've done the research and you've done everything that needs to be done, and you've also promoted it and you've also given it the love that it deserves, then go for it. You know, there's no reason why a non-Filipino can cook Filipino and do it well.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Eastern Honeys. And today we are so incredibly excited to have the one and only Chef Budgie Montoya in the room with us. So as ever, we are going to kick off with a professional bio.
Ferdinand Budgie Montoya is a Filipino-born, Australian-raised chef, writer, and culinary consultant based in London. Budgie began his culinary career when he moved to London in 2012, when, inspired by his journey to rediscover his Filipino roots and navigate cultural identity through food, he launched a supper club, sarap, done in that intonation.
Exactly.
That evolved into a pop-up, and later 2 restaurant concepts, earning praise for his bold yet rooted approach to Filipino flavors. Budgie has since collaborated with global brands, appearing on BBC's Great British Menu, featured in media like The Observer and The Guardian, and has been recognized by critics like Jay Rayner and Jimmy Famurewa. In 2024, after facing health challenges, Budgie made the difficult decision to step back from restaurant life to prioritize well-being. I can relate. Since taking a breather, Budgie has focused on new ways of sharing Filipino cuisine through writing, consultancy, collabs, and creative projects such as Alpas, a modern Filipino pop-up concept, exploring food through the lens of diaspora and local influence. Driven by storytelling, curiosity, and a deep respect for the past and present journeys that food takes, Budgie writes his next chapter. Budgie Montoya, welcome to Eastern Honeys.
Thank you very much for having me.
In your own words, please could you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Budgie Montoya, Ferdinand Budgie Montoya, if we're going to go official. I'm a chef, wannabe writer, and consultant. I started a supper club and restaurant concept called Sarap, which focused on, I guess, my interpretation of Filipino cuisine through sort of my lived experiences of memory and also as a chef learning from sort of classical Western techniques. So incorporating all of that into the restaurant. So started as a supper club that then moved on to restaurants in Brixton and in Haddon Street in Mayfair. I had to shut everything down. Had a heart scare in 2024 and sort of put everything into perspective, really. So this year is sort of focusing on recovering from sort of my heart, just mental and physical health. You know, I think I've been pushing for a great number of years. So I think it's nice to be able to take a year off from the kitchen. I don't think I could ever be fully off the kitchen. So yeah, I'm sort of trying to fall in love with the cooking process again. I still feel like there's a lot of work to do to talk about our cuisine and to champion our cuisine. So trying to find new ways that doesn't involve me spending all those hours in the kitchen and all those, sort of things. So obviously a sort of a new chapter for me this year. I'm kind of enjoying it, really.
I'm so happy to hear that.
There's so many layers to Burnout. There's immigrant hustle. There is like the need to constantly be grinding and hustling.
It's just one of those things where it's like, my parents didn't have to do that. Like, you feel that guilt. I'm here because of their sacrifice. What am I crying about? I need to keep going. Like I need to constantly be building and constantly be doing something to feel like you're paying that debt off, if that makes sense,
Speaking on the immigrant hustle, you immigrated here from Australia.
Yes.
What is your background, and do you identify now as like a Londoner or?
It really depends on who I talk to be honest with you. It's like, yes, I do feel like I'm a Londoner, but I also am from Sydney. I grew up in Sydney. My friend network there is certainly, I went to school there, and I always say that in my soul, I'm Filipino. Like that's, I was born there. That's my ancestral home. I'm full-blooded Filipino. I also identify as Australian and a Londoner. So
tell us about that spark, that flint that got you into cooking, and what made the passion so big you were like, I'm going to leave IT?
Cooking was always like a way for me to relax. I also really enjoyed eating. Like I love food, right? I love food and I love learning about food. So then that natural curiosity, meant that I would want to make great food at home. And so it kind of started from that. My sister-in-law wanted to move to the UK, to London. There's a visa, like when most Aussies will come here through, like a working holiday visa. And so it's like a 2-year visa. And there's limitations in terms of your age. And then we were helping my sister-in-law process that visa. And there was a thing that said, 31 was the cutoff age. I was turning 30 and my wife was turning 31 that year. And we were like, well, if we're going to do this, we have to do this now. And so all these things kind of came together, and we were like, well, let's just do it. I will always have my IT job. I've got that, tenure, and I've got the skill sets to be able to do that. The idea of coming to London was to travel. And the more I got into it, the more I enjoyed it and the more I loved it. The process of putting food on the table is such a personal connection with people.
So Sarap started as a supper club.
Yeah.
And for those that are not Filipino, Sarap means delicious, yum in Tagalog. So what was that like, and how did it shape your journey as a chef and entrepreneur?
It exactly was that. It was a journey. It really was a reflection of me in terms of who I was, what I unraveled, and who I became. There were so many iterations of Sarap because I changed so much in that period, and I think it was what made it difficult to become a permanent restaurant, because it changed so much. There was no clarity, but I needed to go through that process to be able to find meaning in what I was cooking and making it personal and things like that, right? As an entrepreneur, it made it very difficult because, especially when you're seeking for investment and things, you need clear, definitive sort of goals and clear, definitive vision, and trying to market something that, oh yeah, this week it's traditional, and next week actually I kind of want it to be progressive and things like that. And that's what it was. I was navigating through sort of so many things, like trauma, through memory, through what was available here in the UK. Like people always question authenticity and things like that, and it's like, well, we're just doing the best we can with what we have here. And it's like, don't be so critical about it not being like your lolas or your aunties or your mum's cooking in the Philippines, which is a totally different ecosystem of suppliers, ingredients, and everything else versus what we have here, So it's trying to replicate that memory to something relevant today, and with the ingredients that we had available to us. So it was always something to navigate at any given moment in time.
That is a difficult thing to do, because food is so deeply subjective and personal and nostalgic, and it is nearly impossible to translate the essence of what you feel tasting your Lola's cooking into something that other people can.
And also, let's not make any bones about it. We're also trying to run a business. I don't just have to appeal to Filipinos. I have to appeal to everybody else that could potentially be a customer. I remember doing some stats and numbers, and from a population perspective, Filipinos make up less than 2%. I think it's less than 1% of the UK, right? So it's like, that's the UK. So it's like, if I'm opening a Filipino restaurant in London and I'm only focusing on Filipinos, that's not a very big market to try and open to. So then, yes, there has to be some adaptation to your current location, your current thing, and then let's also remember that
PR machine.
PR machines, the commercialization of rent in London in Haddon Street is not is significantly higher than something in Carindera in Manila, right? It's so I think that's when people criticize, under what lens is the question, right? Or it's very easy to just go back to, that's not Filipino, that's not adobo because that's not what I had when my mum cooked it,
But that's the beautiful thing about sharing food. It's like it's always through your own lens, and it's just like of course it's not going to taste the same as your lola's because different hands made it, but that's also fine. So that's why you eat out. I don't know.
But it's a difficult thing because, I think our cuisine is so deeply rooted in our identity.
Yeah.
Right. And so we attach memories and we attach so many things to our cuisine that when it's sort of not the same, or, you go to a Filipino restaurant because you're seeking comfort and you're seeking something, and you go there and it's modern interpretation, or it's using a different ingredient than it normally would, and you naturally feel disappointed because it hasn't brought you back to where your expectation was it would bring you back to that memory, to bring you back to that place. And yeah, exactly, right? So it's a really difficult challenge for any sort of, not just Filipino, but any sort of, anyone that does a cuisine that's so deeply rooted into cultural identity.
That's so true. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
So if you were to describe Filipino food in one sentence for people, but for people who have never tried it, how would you describe it? Because it is so steeped in, the Philippines is 7,000 islands.
7,000.
It got upgraded recently. It's 7,300 or 600 in my head. I don't know.
Growing.
So, yeah, lots of islands. Lots of islands.
Yeah, because there's loads of islands, and and it's different tribes within the Philippines, and it's so steeped in colonial.
I think I recently wrote something, and I was saying that that is a very loaded question.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult question, and it's one of the reasons why I struggled to, I guess, go any further than I did in terms of gaining investment and things like that is, there was no catchphrase. There's no, you talk about the PR machine and you talk about the marketing machine and people want
soundbite.
They want that soundbite. They want that, what am I eating? What am I doing? And it's just well, you're eating history. You're eating, you're eating cultural identity. You're eating so many things that can't just be in one sentence. And I think I wrote on there thing that I refuse to answer that question anymore because it's just for me it's such a difficult thing to do, because I think by doing that you're doing a disservice to, like you said, there's so many tribes, there's so many so much history to unpack in terms of colonialism, the trade, all these things, and to just give it one soundbite is
a bit reductive.
Exactly, right? It's okay, fine, yes, we have colonialism, but actually before, I always go to adobo because it's, people know it and people understand it, but what people know as adobo today versus what it was in I guess pre-colonial times is completely different. Soy sauce didn't come until the Chinese came.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I guess, you look at things like bay leaves and that didn't come until the Spanish, and even the method of how it was cooked was somewhat of a Spanish influence, right? So yeah, there's so many, so I can't really answer that question to be truthful. Our cuisine is too complex for that. So we kind of need to own the fact that it's not
A neat one-liner.
People ask me if is it spicy. Well, no, it is if you're from if you're from Bicol, then yes, but that's because they grow a ton of chilies there, right? Yeah. But like my mum can't even smell chili like before she goes, that's too spicy. You know what I mean? It's like where she's from, there's no chili at all, you know? So it's always an interesting like thing with our cuisine. It's not just tribal and it's not just trade and colonialism, but it's also regionality, right? It's like our cuisine was based on regionality in terms of what was available to that region. We didn't have a supply chain that allowed us to have, you know, what we can get strawberries here in the UK at any given moment in time, right? From anywhere in the world. In the Philippines, I mean, even just recently when I was there last year, I was in El Nido and I really wanted mangosteen, right? But there was no mangosteens. They didn't have them. And like 2 days later, I was in Davao and there was no on the street. My cousin has a farm that doesn't even sell mangosteens because there's no point. It costs more to sell it than it would to like grow. So it just gives it away to family, right? And it's like they're in the same country, yeah, but they can't get mangosteens from here to here, and that defines our cuisine. Like that's, you know, we were thrifty. We adapted, and that's why adobo has 1,000 iterations. You know, and that's why every other dish that we have is one thing here and totally different thing here.
Filipino food is now entering into global recognition. The Michelin Guide is confirmed to go into the Philippines, Manila, Cebu, and that's really going to shift perceptions, maybe more than they ever have been. So speaking on the challenges that you were just talking about of explaining the nuances and complexity of Philippine cuisine, what was it like trying to explain that on TV shows, for example?
It's very difficult because, you know, you're kind of put on there and automatically you're the voice of this cuisine, or you're the voice of this entire country of so much diversity, right? And it's so difficult, and you don't want to be reductive and you don't want to leave anything out. And I think the most important thing that I tried to do was just be authentic to myself and my lived experiences, because I think the idea and the notion of that is that I am Filipino, and so what I do by default is a Filipino experience, you know. And so I try to just be authentic in as much as possible with that, you know. It was always about my memories. It was always about my interpretations of the cuisine through my lens and through the sort of the narrative of now, you know, where I am, what ingredients I'm working with, the skills that I've learned through the types of kitchens that I've worked through. So I think that was what I always tried to do. I didn't want to speak for the Philippines. It wasn't something that I wanted to ever do. You know, you get thrown into a limelight and you get thrown into something, and then it's all of a sudden I'm the expert in that cuisine. I'm not like an expert in Filipino cuisine. I'm a student and I always will be. Like, there's so much to learn about Filipino cuisine that I haven't even touched the surface. You know, I had a discussion with someone recently about, you know, what's authentic in terms of Filipino cuisine, and that's a really long conversation. One of the things that I was saying to them was that Filipino cuisine outside of the Philippines is also ultimately through one lens or a very small lens, because it was shaped through migration, right? And that migration came and was to a very privileged few. Not everyone could migrate out of the Philippines, right? In fact, most people wanted to migrate to Luzon or Manila, and people from Luzon or Manila mainly were the ones that were able to migrate out of the Philippines, right? So the cuisine that you're basing it on is Luzon cuisine. It's cuisine from Manila and that area, right? And for the most part, obviously there are, you know, nuances and stuff, but historically, they were the people that were able to migrate out.
That's blown my mind a bit. Yeah.
So our definition of Filipino cuisine outside of the Philippines is through the lens of Luzon.
Whoa, and layers of privilege and yeah.
Right. So like, again, it's like authenticity is a loaded word, isn't it?
I think also like what being authentic, it means something different to the individual.
Yeah.
So like what your perception of authenticity in terms of food could be someone like different from another Filipino person's.
I mean, if you look at authenticity or authentic in the dictionary, well, I think one of the meanings is something to do with not copied or something like that, right? It's so you look at that perspective and it's like, well, what I'm doing can't be copied because it's my perspective, right? It's like this is my adobo, this is my sinigang, this is I remember doing sinigang on Great British Menu and I used rhubarb as the souring agent, right? It makes sense to me as a chef. Rhubarb is a sour product, right? And now you go back to the Philippines and not everyone uses tamarind to sour something. Depending on where you are, they will have a different souring agent. And also, let's move to the future. Thanks to the Americanization of our cuisine, where convenience is so prevalent. We now have Knorr packets of that is sinigang. I'll look up a sinigang recipe, and the recipe says,
I
had a sachet of Knorr package seasoning, and it's like, well, that's not. But is that authentic? Like
it is.
Yeah, right. Like a lot of people grew up with not knowing what it was to sour a sinigang other than using a packet.
Speaking of like the ingredients, I guess not ingredients, but like condiments and like that kind of thing.
Sarsawan.
Yeah.
Sarsawan, yeah.
What, for those who don't know, sarsawan is sauce?
Yeah, just dipping sauces essentially, yeah.
What are your like fave dipping sauces?
Mine's the classic toyomansi, like soy sauce, calamansi, and usually like a little bit of chili in there. Not too much. I like a little bit of spice, but not too much. But for like a ready-made one, like my favorite is pinakura.
Oh.
Have you ever had pinakura picklebacks?
No. What's that?
You know what a pickleback is? It's like when you take a shot of like a whiskey or whatever, and then you drink the pickle juice as a chaser.
I've never heard of it. Yes. Let's do it after this.
You do a shot. So you should do a shot of like, I did some work with Don Papa Rum a lot, and we used to have events, and I used to get them to do shots of like Don Papa Rum and then pinakura. That's
what?
Oh God, it's amazing.
This is an education for me.
Definitely gets you. Yeah.
Is bagaong a condiment?
Yeah, bagaong. I mean, yeah. So it's. Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, bagaong. I prefer to use bagaong like in the cooking process than having to like it's
intense. Is a very steep acceptance thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like I love it, obviously, but I think it is a step to get someone that isn't accustomed to that
maybe not start there.
Yeah, it's definitely not as a dipping sauce, like in the cooking process. Yeah, cool. It's just like, oh yeah, there's shrimp paste in there,
I'll eat that with rice sauce.
Oh,
yeah, okay, cool, yeah.
Literally just dip the green mango in the jar, right? Yeah. So we've been there. It's fun.
We really related to a piece you wrote about displacement as a third culture kid. In an Instagram post, you wrote, "In championing Filipino cuisine, the hardest part was facing doubt and criticism from my own people, questioning the value, authenticity, and narrative of what I created. Especially as a third culture kid, my food reflects a journey of displacement and rediscovery. The question, is this Filipino enough, was something I heard often. But in Filipino cuisine, like the diaspora, it's fluid, evolving, and multidimensional." So from that, What have you learned about external validation in your journey? And how deeply do you think colonial mentality affects even us third, fourth culture kids
I think that's a deeply rooted issue that we have as a culture. I think it's something that's limited us for a very long time. You know, I think of other cultures or other cuisines in their culture and how they've been able to progress very quickly. There's obviously more than one reason behind those things. We hold ourselves back by those, or making those statements of and judging our peers because of your sort of colonial mentality, right? I think it's a difficult thing to navigate. It's not, and it's a very personal, and everyone goes through it differently. And some people don't see it, some people see it, some people. It's just it's a mess, and colonialism is a mess. It's one of those things where, like, when you say something like that, people go, "So what's the answer?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know the answer. Like, I'm discovering it myself. And so for me, cooking is a way to sort of decolonize myself. But that doesn't mean that I'm saying no to the white man, you know, like there are, I'm privileged to be able to do what I'm doing because of colonialism. No colonialism, but I'm here because of it. It's one of those, I don't have the answers, the real thing. I think everyone goes through it individually. I think the more we talk about it, the more it becomes normalized to have those feelings and to be able to then express those feelings. And I think that's important. Because then we don't sort of externalize it through criticism. When we criticize our fellow Filipinos about the rest, let's say in the restaurant world, it's not authentic, or you know, is it not really that Filipino kind of thing? It's like I feel like that's blurting out that colonial mentality that they've had, and it's the only way they know how to express it, you know, like, because they haven't got a safe space to express it, you know. The more we have these conversations, the better. But I think it's going to take a long time, maybe beyond my generation or my existence to untangle it, if ever. But I think we discussed this earlier, off camera, that every generation untangles a little, you know.
But also not having the answers is normal and fine and okay.
Yeah.
It's just asking the questions, right?
Yeah. It's asking the questions and letting it sit.
Based on that as well, you know, I think, like, don't get me wrong about the Michelin thing. I think it's a fantastic thing in the Philippines. I think it will put our cuisine on world stage, and it will then get people curious about our cuisine. Where I'm concerned, or where I feel it could be challenging, is what lens is Filipino cuisine being put out there, right? We're not just a fine dining, you know. It's not, and don't get me wrong, again, like the fine dining restaurants in the Philippines, like I've been to a few, would rival any Michelin-starred restaurants that I've been to across the world. But that's not the only voice that, you know, and I think that's we need to find a balance.
I love that answer. It's like, the answer is interrogate everything. But last week or 2 weeks ago, I saw an article / a few posts on Instagram about this new Thai restaurant.
Yeah.
That's just won a Michelin award.
Yeah, Anglo Thai.
Yes, that one.
John, is it good? Yeah,
yeah.
Well, yeah.
So what are your thoughts on authenticity when someone not of a culture is doing all the right techniques, all the right flavors, ingredients with all the right sourcing and provenance and context set, but they're not of the culture?
I think that anyone should be able to cook whatever they want. Where I feel uncomfortable, when there isn't enough, I guess, linkage or respect to that original culture. You know, if you've done the work, if you've done the research, and you've done, you know, everything that needs to be done, and you've also promoted it, and you've also given it the love that it deserves, then go for it. You know, I think, like, there's no reason why a non-Filipino can cook Filipino and do it well. Like, there's a restaurant in the Philippines, in Manila, called Gallery by Chalet. He's Spanish. He's a Filipino wife, but he's Spanish, and he's very linked to like Spanish gastronomy in terms of that style of cooking, and it's amazing. He will definitely get Michelin stars when it opens, right? He did a thing about cacao. He and his team went to Davao, spent a huge amount of time learning about cacao processes, what it is, and he basically created a menu that incorporated the entire cacao and all, not just chocolate, just like the entire thing into his menu. He got slack for it because he was white, right? Because he was Spanish. And it was like, but he did the work. Mm-hmm. He put in everything, and he championed something that not even our own government champions, right? It's like we produce cacao, like, but how often do you know that? You think of South America and all those kinds of things that are the ones that provide the cacao across the globe, right? In terms of thing, but we are one of the biggest producers, but we don't have.
I'm starting to see tablea in some hot chocolate spots.
Sure, yeah.
But it's so slept on.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So it's like, where do we draw the line? He uplifted a community in Davao and uplifted that industry, but because he was white, he was ostracized by Filipinos. It's like, it doesn't make sense to me.
So earlier you shared about, is it like you're having a year of time off or like rest away from like cooking?
Restaurants. Let's say restaurants. I think away from, like, I don't think I could ever leave a kitchen, right? I love it so much. Like, I love cooking. I enjoy cooking, and it can be anything. I love the kitchen. I think there was a time when it became a job and it became my business, and it became everything else other than cooking, and I lost that enjoyment. So I think this year, my goals are very simple this year. It's pay rent and get better. Anything else is like, if it doesn't fall into those categories, then what am I doing it for?
I really relate, I'm sure, relate to earlier when you were like, before it's like, yes.
Yeah.
Great, that's progress. Because it's like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
You have to start saying no, and you have to start listening. Otherwise, burnout is real.
Do you think this time of like rest, reflection, and like boundary setting in a sense, do you think it's helped you like rediscover a love for like food again?
It's also made me think about food differently, right? It's like, especially towards the end. So it became a commercial thing. It was no longer about learning about my heritage. It was no longer about telling a story. It was purely becoming commercial. London is a difficult and expensive place to open and run a restaurant, right? So it's taught me to then now navigate and learn about our cuisine through a different lens again. I'll go back to that, I suppose. Back to that inquisitive lens. It's certainly helped with the sort of creativity and talking about Alpas, which is the pop-up, that series that I want to sort of work on. I did something last year, and I really want to sort of focus on that again, sort of this year, maybe next year. And it's really being as authentic as possible for me. I think it's like the iterations of everything I've done and what I've learned, and it's given me confidence to be who I am now. Alpas means like to be free. It's like, something like that. Like, I've gone through that to learn who I am, and I still will continue to learn who I am, but now I've got the confidence to be able to do what I need to do and want to do.
And do it in your own time.
Exactly right. I think there's younger, hungrier, slightly more naive, and you need that naivety to push through boundaries and things like that. Chefs and restaurateurs out there now pushing the boundaries of Filipino cuisine. Donnie had got a Michelin bib, something I'd never achieved, right? It's like, Rex Turaturas getting investment from people like Apple Diap, right? Like, so it's like these are things that are progressive and they will do great things, right? And like, I think, usually you're one of the OG chefs. You said that earlier. And I think part of that is recognizing when it's time to sort of step away and letting people that are, moving at a faster pace.
Or not
today.
Innovation.
No. Just moving at a faster pace, or being able to, or being able to like to progress the cuisine differently, or in a better, or for lack of a better word, in a better way. To take a step back, and I think I'm confident, and I'm happy with the contribution that I've made.
And then that's the most important thing.
Did I achieve everything? No. Do I still have more to give? I think so. But I'm also more conscious of what the costs are of being able to like push at that level, So
Speaking of the costs that are involved in being a food entrepreneur, what are some of the challenges that we literally just don't see as people who just go to enjoy the food? And what sage advice would you give to any food entrepreneur, whether you're Filipino or Asian or from another background, before they go into a venture like that?
I think the main thing is that you have to believe in it. Like, you have to believe in what you're trying to achieve and what you're doing, and I think that's really the important thing, because skill and talent can only take you so far. It's that belief that will take you, because you will be tested. There are things that will test you to the point of questioning your life decisions, right? And you have to find a way to get through that. And if you don't have that resolve and belief of what you're doing, then you won't find it. Right. So I think that's one thing. Internal validation is more important than external validation. I think that's don't get caught up in that external validation. It's a slippery slope, but I think more than anything is to start and to just figure it out. If you think that people that are in positions of success knew what the hell they were doing, then you have no idea what they had no idea what they were doing. Like, because you're pushing boundaries, right? You're going through things that no one's ever done, or you've never done. So if you feel like you have no idea what you're doing, you're probably doing the right thing. Because it's about growth, right? It's like you can't progress without that fear of the unknown, right? Like, it's I think that's an important. Don't stop yourself because you think you don't know what you're doing, right? If you're asking the questions and you're moving, whether it's left, right, forward, back, even, like me taking a break, I don't see that as a step back. I just see that as literally a pause. I think that is the most important thing. It's just like, have a clear vision in your head, what you want, and just move towards it in any direction. Don't be afraid of the unknown.
I love that.
Yeah, very cliche, but I think it's
and growth happens outside the comfort zone.
Yeah,
right.
And growth isn't linear. To close this beautiful conversation, if you were to write a love letter to diaspora, what would you say?
Thank you for giving me a home to feel safe in, a community to feel safe in. Simple.
Your emotional one line. Thank you, Budgie, for everything
for having me.
You've done for the diaspora to put on Filipino culture, cuisine, push through all the probably horrific challenges you've had to go through.
There's been some. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but there's also been some very, very, very cool and amazing things that have happened from it. So
tell this camera, the people, where they can find you, social handles, what projects you've got coming up, and if there's anything that they can support.
My Instagram is Budgie_Montoya. I have a Substack, Budgie Montoya, and publication called Sasawan, where I write about pretty much what we've been speaking about, as much as in depth as possible. It's free. I don't ask for anything. It's just a way for me to practice my writing. And then, look out for Alpas, which will be my pop-up coming up as and when.
Thank you so much, Budgie, for that amazing conversation. Thank you, Melissa, for being a bad bee. Thank you, Isabel, and thank you, crew, for being amazing. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Eastern Honeys. Every like, comment, and share means the world to us and helps spread the joy, love, and magic vibes that is the Filipino culture and the wider Asian diaspora too. So on that note, we'll see you on the next one.
Catch you soon.
Salamat!
Bye.